Well, good afternoon. This is Coach Zetcher, and another session of the Then and Now. Um, I have a great guest coming on today, Vahe Gregorian, who's a great columnist for the Kansas City Star. And Vahe, he was a Post-Dispatch writer for many years and then went up to Kansas City, and he's got a lot of stuff to talk about. Particularly, he'll talk about the World Cup today because Vahe covered the World Cup up in Kansas City. Before I start today, though, there's a few things I want to mention. The shirt I'm wearing here, it says Irish Pub on it. My daughter Stephanie got it for me when she was climbing the Mount Everest, and I guess she was thinking about her dad and got me this shirt, Irish Pub. Then over here is a T-shirt right here. I coach my grandson's youth football team after I retired, the Parkway Colts. Then up here's a plaque of a championship that we won when I was coaching my son Jake Brown's baseball team. And then this is a sweatshirt of that group of boys from Clayton that I coached when they were in the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade playing youth football. And I bring this up because all these kids, the Parkway kids, all the Clayton kids, they all played on a team with their friends. They didn't go out and try to recruit people from all over the area. And by golly, they had some great success. And gee whiz, the Parkway kids, one of those guys on that team is in the NFL right now, and another one is a big-time uh, uh, instructor of youth basketball in St. Louis. And my grandson on that team, he's the assistant coach over at Parkway Central Football. So it's all good. And I wanted to just talk about one or two other things. I was going through some of my items at home, and I came across a letter from Mr. Irv Utz's son. Irv Utz was my baseball coach at Washington U, and briefly, I'll tell you what the letter was about. The baseball field at Washington U used to be named after Coach Utz, and for some unexplained reason, when they tore that field down and moved it across the street over on Forsyth, it became the Leo Kelly field. And myself and Rich McFessel, who has passed, and Tom McConnell Jr., the three of us went over to talk to the athletic director at Washington University about this. I thought it was an indiscretion. And we talked and we talked and we talked. And fortunately, they decided to put the name of Irv Utz back on that new field. And it's now called the Irv Utz Stadium and the Leo Kelly Field. So, and his son sent us a beautiful letter thanking us. They had a big reunion the weekend that it was dedicated, and so forth and so on. So, anyway, let me see if I have anything else here that's about all I want to talk about right now. I want to bring my guest on. Good morning.
Hey, Zach, how you doing?
Look at you. You look like $1,000,000, buddy.
Well, I got
Golly.
a haircut. They say look better, feel better.
Well, you look great, and I really thank you so much, Vahe, for taking the time to be with us today. You're a renowned columnist, and you were a football player too in your day.
Well, as they say, I played left out.
You
Uh,
played left out. Well,
yeah.
well, I've been reading a lot of things that you have done, and the first thing I want to talk to you about before we talk about the World Cup, I read your article about J.C. Lauderback, and let me just tell you, I knew J.C. very well also. And another guy on that crew that day was one of my very, very good friends. He was a great athlete down at Missouri, Terry Turlington. You remember Terry?
Yeah.
Well, that day, we had the NCAA meeting in Chicago. And gee whiz, that's all you heard about is about this Missouri Colorado game. And then Turlington, he was a basketball official. He had to come to this NCAA meeting. And he walked in there, and the guy looked like he had just been beaten down, with what's going on and everything else. Terry survived it, and J.C. Lauderback didn't. What do you think, Vahe? What do you think happened?
Well, I think a few things happened. I'm glad you're asking about that. But I would say, from how I came to understand JC over the years, JC did survive it, but JC bore the brunt of it in a way that was, as you would know from a lot of different experiences, in a way that was unfair and pretty mean spirited in a lot of ways. The thing that he brought to it, though, was a real grace and example of how to be how to be in a moment of sort of trauma and great stress. He did not hide from it. He was a math teacher, as you know, who made it a point to talk to his students about it. He saw it as a chance to help people understand how these things happen, and also as a chance to demonstrate what somebody does in their hour of trauma is probably strong, but it's something like that. So I had occasion. One of the reasons I wanted to write that article after JC died was that I had occasion to go spend a day with him on the 10th anniversary of the Fifth Down, and I felt kind of connected to him thereafter. It's not like we were in touch a lot, but I was fortunate to hear from his daughter a few months before he died, and we shared a few things that were really touching. So I just think that it's a world you've lived in so many ways, and it does connect a little bit to some of this World Cup stuff. But what we do to somebody who is a good person, understood to be a man of integrity, and a mistake was made that really wasn't exactly his fault. It was just that it was being the crew chief made it his responsibility, and that was I think, to me, a lot of the great lesson of that is that somebody was willing to say, I bear the brunt of this, regardless of whether it was directly my fault.
Well, see, I knew him pretty well, and he was a man of integrity, and he was a terrific official, and he was also a wonderful educator, and his whole life was devoted to those kids at the school, and he just lived his life the right way. And I read your article and how those guys used to. Five was a funny number that you got. Tell me a little bit about that five number. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Well, the thing it was almost like you couldn't make it up. It was the day that I went to spend with him, and I was getting ready to leave, and he pointed to the four grandchildren on a photo on his refrigerator, and I counted them. I said, I said that's five.
That's awesome. Well,
And he laughed and said it got to the point where he wasn't sure he liked to say the number five anymore.
well, here's the one thing I did. I mentioned it when it happened, and I told a number of people. I said, they're all over the officials, and rightfully so. That's a big time mistake. But I said, Missouri University, what, they have 12 coaches on the sideline, 13, 14?
I don't know the number at that time, but there were a lot of people.
Yeah, don't you guys have kind of a job too down there to know what down it is?
Well, here's the other thing about this, that and you would understand this too, because you've seen these situations, right? A frenzied crowd, stuff going on that is a little outside your scope. That was the first year you could spike the ball in college football to stop the clock. There was a little bit of confusion over whether Colorado had used a timeout or whether the ball had been spiked on one of the downs. Meanwhile, in the middle of all this, some people on the Missouri sideline are catching on, but not everybody. And this, you may consider this irrelevant, but somebody's having a heart attack in the stands down there. A lot of attention started diverting to that. It wouldn't happen today. It really couldn't happen today because of so much technology and things like that. But in that moment, it was, if one of those things hadn't happened that way, maybe it wouldn't have gone that way. The other thing, of course, that's sort of extra cruel about it is it's not quite clear whether Colorado got in the end zone on the actual one too.
That was very questionable, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. There's a couple other things on here I want to talk to you about. We'll talk about the World Cup at the end. How's that?
Sure, sounds good.
But you were there and you've seen a lot of it, and you got some. We'll talk about that red card, because I'll tell you what, I know a lot about balls and strikes, and inbounds and out of bounds, pass interference, and so forth and so on. I know nothing about soccer. You're going to educate me a little bit, okay?
I will try. I may be only a few steps ahead of you, if ahead of you.
So anyway, listen, there's some stuff here that I want to talk to you about. First of all, 25 years with the Post before you went up to Kansas City. And at the Post-Dispatch, you worked with some great guys, didn't you?
Oh, I sure did. I'm glad you're asking that question. I think about this all the time. I got hired by Mike Smith, who believed in me before I believed in myself. I got to be around so many people that I learned from, but probably most of all, just because I spent so much time with them, Rick Hummel and Jim Thomas. And and a good number of colleagues who helped you feel like you fit in before you sort of deserved it. And as you probably remember, as I think anybody would attest, when you're uncertain of yourself and just learning, it's hit or miss. You may or may not end up in the business if you don't get pointed in the right direction and have the right kind of, for lack of a better term, mentorship and examples anyway. So, I mean, I could talk all day about so many of my colleagues, but Jim and Rick were the ones that I was around the most at a pivotal early time. And, baseball didn't really become my thing. But at that point, the young writers at the Post-Dispatch, when you were covering high school sports in the summer, you would be over at the Cardinals 30 or 40 times or more. And sometimes you'd be working on Cardinals things, but sometimes you'd get the dreaded opposing player feature and you'd have to go over and talk to Barry Bonds or Len Dykstra, and they may not want to talk to you, things like that. But you could always count on Rick to tell somebody you should talk to this guy,
Well, you know
things
what?
like that.
Well, I'm a member of this 1-2-3 club here,
Oh,
Vahe.
yeah.
And Rick, of course, Rick was a member long before I became a member. And every Monday when we met and we had lunch, and Whitey would be there, and Hannafin. I mean, these were some Costas when he was in town, and these were some meetings that you just couldn't believe. The conversation that went on and everything else. Rick Hummel, if you didn't know who he was, you would just think he was a guy who stopped in that day to have lunch. I mean, the most humble, gracious guy, in my opinion. Now, you knew him a lot better than me, but he was just a first-class guy, wasn't he?
He was, and unflappable, a great storyteller. Things just seem to happen around Rick a lot of a lot of times. I won't be able to recreate the story, but he had one of his writing machines. It was back in the Jurassic era. One of his writing machines got stolen in Philly, and somehow ended up with a SWAT team helping him get it back. I mean, it was just kind of weird stuff like that. And by the way, Ron, I was remiss, as you mentioned 1-2-3 Club. Bernie Miklasz was at the Post-Dispatch just briefly when I was here, and then left, and then came right back. But all through our time, Bernie and, my gosh, Stu Durando and Elizabeth Holland and Jeff Gordon and Dan O'Neill, and I could just go on about that sense of camaraderie that we all had together. As you know, on any crew you worked, I mean, it was all about being greater than the sum of the parts. And that was what the beauty of getting to cover these things.
Let me throw you a real quick name, and you don't have to say anything. He was my next door neighbor when my wife and I moved into a small apartment when we were first married. And my next door neighbor, we became pretty good buddies, Jeff Myers.
Jeff Myers was just before my time. But I would always come across old Jeff Myers pieces. He was a great writer.
Oh, was he? He was a great writer, and a great guy, by the way.
Yeah.
Who sometimes had some lapses in judgment, as we all have. Oh, he's a great guy.
Yeah. I'm glad that Ron, when I was a kid, and maybe when you were a kid, that if you did something wrong, the teacher might tell you it's going on your permanent record. And then after a little while, I realized there didn't seem to really be a permanent record, but today there would be.
Oh, absolutely.
With every manner of ability to track your every move.
Here's some guys here. I want to talk about these guys because I know you covered them, and these are some big time people. And just briefly, you don't have to tell me a whole lot about them, but I'll just throw some of these Kansas City greats, and your brief impression of them. Not you don't have to go in a long. George Brett.
George is a fascinating guy. If you're a sports writer in Kansas City, you've gotten pretty lucky to know George Brett because he's still around the Royals a lot. I've spoken with George a good number of times about anything from his own history to sort of just different trends. I'll tell you a quick funny story. I was kind of blessed to go into the Basketball Writers Hall of Fame a few years ago. And that was announced right before spring training. So I got to spring training, and George is down there in uniform and comes over to me and kind of runs over to me to give me a hug and says, "You're going in the Hall of Fame." And I said, "George, so this Hall of Fame isn't quite like your Hall of Fame. In fact, there isn't even a physical form of this Hall of Fame, but it I tell you that story just to tell you how he kind of becomes that engaged, and I feel lucky to know George.
Well, here, I'll throw another name at you, Tom Watson.
I've gotten to know Tom pretty well too. The Mount Rushmore of Kansas City sports still remains until added upon or altered. It really is understood to be George Brett, Tom Watson, Len Dawson, and Buck O'Neill. Now, each guy's there for a different reason, but those two are the living pillars of it. And Tom is, of course, a fascinating guy, and George and Tom have a nice relationship. One of the reasons I know them both is that every year, unfailingly, they go to a ALS fundraiser event that they've been instrumental in because each lost a close friend to ALS. And in fact, on George's statue at Kauffman Stadium, it speaks to the commitment he made to his friend Keith Worthington that he's going to keep fighting to fight ALS until it's cured. Thomas
Well,
had a similar from his caddy, Bruce Edwards.
well, see, you never hear a bad word about those guys. Now, I'm going to name two guys who are not on that Mount Rushmore yet, but I'll bet you they will be someday. One guy's name is Mahone, and the other guy's name is Reed.
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting because the Mount Rushmore was already established, and I guess you're not supposed to add on to Mount Rushmore.
Start their own.
But it might be, yeah, the modern Mount Rushmore. It's a really interesting question because in the end, those guys were the guys on there now are pioneers. You could certainly say that Patrick and Andy stand on the shoulders of what was accomplished by the early Chiefs. Obviously, not just Len Dawson, but Bobby Bell, Willie Lanier, Lamar Hunt, everything. But I will say a couple of impressions quickly of those guys. I'm lucky to have known Andy since he was an assistant coach at Missouri. And what was funny about Andy during that time is he was the assistant coach who would come over to the sideline and just want to chat with everybody. And I do think that's who Andy really is. He's a very amiable guy, but he's got a little bit of a name, rank, serial number persona as a head coach. It's just kind of how he is. But I know about those personal aspects of him, and I certainly know about some relationships he has that tell you more about who he really is than the guy you see in front of us. I do want to say this about Patrick. I've probably been around Patrick a couple hundred times or more by now because we see him a couple times a week. Now it's been almost a decade. And I guess I just hope people know this. I've never once seen him roll his eyes at a question. I've never once seen him be snarky with anybody. He loves to talk about his mistakes. In fact, it's almost more interesting to hear him talk about the things that go wrong than the things that go right. So it's been really kind of cool, I think, for Kansas Cityans to feel like, okay, there's this guy who's a transcendent player. Also turns out he's a good guy.
That's great. And another great young guy in Kansas City is that shortstop.
He is, and there's some similar things in their background, including that their fathers were both longtime major leaguers, and that led a little bit, I think, to some of their sort of self-possessed ease with or appearance of ease anyway with the situation. I would say what's interesting is that Bobby Witt is always ready to talk to you. But I think Bobby Witt is going against the grain a little bit. I think Bobby's a little bit shy, and I don't think Patrick is shy per se. So it's more work, I think, for Bobby Witt to be more outgoing. But I think he's also just a good-natured guy, and I think he's a great teammate, and that's part of what makes him so admirable. I think that it's when you've heard this, it's a cliche for a reason, but when you're best player is your hardest worker and shows the way all the time, that's pretty good for an organization.
I agree with that 100%. Real quick, when I was a freshman football coach at Ladue, and I coached those kids for 30 years, usually the first kid on the field, and this goes every year, for some reason, the first kid out and the last kid to leave turned out to really be about my best player every year. They wanted to get out there and get to work, and they wanted to stay. You know what I mean? They didn't want practice to end. They
Yeah.
wanted to learn and get better. Now, real quick, going back to the Chiefs, were some of those players' feelings hurt that they weren't invited to that wedding?
Well, what's funny is they have uh, the non-disclosure. I guess right now it leaves us still a little confused about who was or wasn't invited. I saw some internet conjecture about who was or wasn't invited. I, I hard for me to know. I think most people would understand if you're not invited. If you're not invited to a wedding, but when it's 1,000 people, maybe you feel like you should make the cut.
Yeah, you should make the cut. Madison Square, is it Madison Square Garden they got married?
Yes, that's how it went. Now,
Well,
it's funny. I've been so consumed with the World Cup that I haven't read that much about what we've learned about the wedding itself. It sounded like it was uh, sort of surreal, to be honest. But yeah, I don't think there'll be any divisions in the locker room because of it, though.
no, heck no. And by the way, she's it looks like she's trained him a little bit. Um, he's kind of following her politically, from what I've seen.
Well, it's very interesting about her and him. Travis is a guy that in the decade plus of seeing him, he is many things all at once. I mean, he can be um, incredibly charming, incredibly charismatic. I think he is incredibly charismatic. He can sometimes come off like a diva or a brat. I do think he's grown out of a lot of that. Um, I think he is also a natural born comedian. I mean, he's just got the gift of that timing. Everything I've seen about and read about Taylor Swift is indicates to me she's a fundamentally decent person who is quite concerned with making sure that she does good for the world and that is reflected in how she behaves too. I mean, nobody's perfect, but I think that she's probably appealing to the better angels of Travis's nature in a lot of ways.
Well, she's awesome too. They're both. It's a great marriage, and I hope it lasts forever. I really do. The two very good people, and they're both good for each other, from what
It
I
sure,
know.
yeah,
You
it sure
know,
seems like that. It's kind of a lot of fun. It was sort of weird when it first started. Like these things just seemed like they were coming from very different worlds and didn't quite seem to go together. And then over time, it's like okay, and I think it's pretty charming.
it's wonderful. Listen, I guess maybe we should talk a little bit about the World Cup. What
Yeah,
about
sure.
every? I have some grandsons, and they're sport freaks, and I think they know a little bit. Think they know a little bit too much more about sports than they really know. I think maybe they lose a little money once in a while gambling.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
They know. So France is absolutely going to win the World Cup. Pop, don't even nobody else. Oh, okay. What? I don't know. Why they lost yesterday 2-0.
Yeah, yeah. It's you know I feel like I'll go back to something you said earlier. I'm not sure I ever felt like I knew enough about who to see as the favorites, other than to figure the favorites were the favorites. And it's played out a little bit like I know you can remember back to when the NCAA tournament was 48 teams. That it looks like virtually, I guess it's not going to be the four number one seeds, but it's going to be three of the number ones essentially. Um, One thing I do want to say, I'm not sure if you were going to ask this, but I guess I do want to say it. It was an amazing privilege to cover it in Kansas City because of a few things, right? But the main thing is Kansas City is the smallest of the 16 host cities, and because of that, it's like the SEC saying it just means more. I mean, you could tell it was a real point of pride to Kansas City to demonstrate it could pull off such an elaborate event with so many people coming. And from the moment you walked into the airport, it was like, oh, this is a different place. I mean, I just flew into New York. I've been through three or four or five of the other airports over this time. You can't even tell the World Cup's happening there. Doesn't mean they didn't put on a good World Cup, but it just sort of from the get-go says, okay, this really matters here. And I think from all indications, other than a traffic glitch the first night, it was a supreme success for Kansas City. I'm not sure what the final numbers will tell us about how many people came. It's certainly going to be in the hundreds of thousands. And I can tell you anecdotally, we saw so many joyous interactions, including, as you probably know, the great story of how Algeria was received in Lawrence, Kansas, where the KU band learned the Algerian national anthem, and that was just for starters. So as far as the Kansas City part of it, it was really pretty great. And I guess St. Louis will have something to look forward to in 2028 with hosting some Olympic soccer matches.
Yes, that's what I understand. And by the way, Kansas City's pretty damn lucky to have you covering the World Cup. They got the best doing it. So
Well, I
you're
appreciate that. Yeah, we have
well,
and that was another thing we were talking about all our Post Dispatch colleagues before, but my goodness, I've been lucky to work with great people at the Star, and to share in this with some of these people has been, a great career highlight for sure.
well, I just think that they've got we had the best when you were here, and they've got the best right now, which is phenomenal. Okay, now let's get into the nitty gritty. Who's gonna win? Who's gonna win tonight?
Um, it's funny. So I don't know if you've thought of it this way, but this is a little bit like having Mizzou against KU for us, because Argentina and England both base camped in Kansas City. These are our teams. These are our guys. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, I guess Argentina, as the defending champ and sort of, I think the one everybody wants to knock off, I think I find myself falling into the underdog camp a little bit. I think it'd be kind of interesting to see England win. I'd be lying if I didn't say it was more than a coin toss. I suppose I would sooner expect Argentina to win. But as you know, why they play the games, or the
Well,
matches, I should say.
absolutely, Vahe. See, I look at it, and I don't know anything, but I look at the game um, like if the Cardinals were playing whoever back in the day, and Gibson was pitching tonight. I would say, well, I think the Cardinals have a real good chance to win tonight. And they got Messi. And
Yeah.
he's supposed to be the greatest player in the world, or at least the little kids over at Spady Elementary School, where I sub. You can't walk through the halls of that school, Vi. They all have on Messi jerseys. It's unbelievable. How
It's
good is he?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's on that level, right, where you just you hold your breath when he gets the ball. I mean, to be his age and to get the hat trick in the first match of the tournament and then score, I think, in every match until the last one. Um, it is something else, isn't it? When there's a guy that everybody's eyes are on, that everybody knows you have to stop, and he still does it. And
What I
that's been something he's been able to do.
well, what I would, I watched him the other night. It's the first time I really watched an entire game, and what I couldn't believe, he's a left footer, and his corner kicks, every single one of them they're perfect. They're right in the middle of the goal almost, aren't they?
Yeah,
Am I missing something?
I saw him deliver from uh I got to think what the yardage is, but from outside the box with his right foot, and just missed going in, but it was with the same oomph that you would expect from his you know left foot.
Yeah.
And that's what's, I mean, when you can be essentially, I don't know if it's ambidextrous when it's with your feet, but it's pretty uncanny.
He's he's a legendary soccer player forever, just like Pele and that whole group of guys. Let me ask you this: the red card. I thought the article you wrote regarding that red card, I thought it was spot on, and I had a few conversations. But you remember Bill McDermott?
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the 1-2-3 club right after that red card incident. And I'm sitting right next to him at lunch, and the guy knows soccer. He's been around the damn game. He's played it, and he knows it. And I asked him what he thought, and I thought he was going to say it was a horrible. He said that was spot on. He says the call was 100% correct, and he explained it to me about if a leg goes into an opponent around the heel. Is that making sense so far? Um, it's an automatic. Explain it to me. Help me.
Well, here's the thing. I feel a little more comfortable talking about the broader process than that intricacy, because that is a little complicated to me. I think,
Yeah, me
for
too.
argument's sake, to me, I feel pretty comfortable saying it was a bad call, that it shouldn't be a red card. And maybe the reason I just want to establish that ground is I feel like the more interesting thing in the end is what are our systems for for dealing with this when this happens. And part of what I think the outrage of what happened next is that there is a system set up for appeal, and by every indication, that was not engaged at all until the president of the United States made this phone call. Essentially, I don't feel hesitant to use this term, leaning on FIFA, um, because it doesn't really matter if he's pretending to say, "I just asked for a review." That's not what's happening. When that's and frankly, this man is you every single day you see, you can't take anything he says at face value. I mean, it's really not conjecture. That's just fact. I mean, anybody, whatever side of the aisle you're on, should be able to concede that his methods always involve deception. So,
Amen. Amen.
so there, we know that. And so then what happens is, to me, the reason it provoked something in me was this feeling of having no boundaries whatsoever about anything. And then once you start saying that, then there's no system. It's anarchy. There's no justice. I get that bad calls happen and that it's too bad when they happen. We started off talking about the J.C. Louderback call.
Well, how about this? How about the Bill? Look what Bill Buckner lived through.
Yeah,
Look,
yeah,
let's make it right here in St. Louis, Vahe. How about the Don Deckinger call at first base? That's a
yeah,
World Series winner.
yeah.
Guess what?
And
Whitey lived through it. Whitey handled it. Did you know, and I found this out later, that when Deckinger retired, Whitey went to his retirement and spoke?
I saw that they developed a relationship later. There's a book out last year you might be interested in. I'm familiar with it because I just was the moderator at an event for it. It's called Interstate 85. It's about the 85 World Series, and it says you couldn't tell if it was written from a Royals perspective or a Cardinals perspective. You feel like you get all the voices in there, but there's a lot about Don Denkinger in there, and um, you know that's its own conversation in a way. But one of the things I always tell friends is, look, it was a bad call. But unlike a bad call at the very end of the very last play of the very last game, Cardinals were free to play after that. And I,
Yeah.
I I mean no disrespect, but the Cardinals absolutely came unglued. I
Well,
mean, plays in that inning and then the next game, and so I I suppose that's a whole different conversation in a way, um, but I think the point really still remains, like, without a system, you have chaos, and once you start letting it seem that the pressure of a sitting president in the country where the event is being held can exert influence that, by all indications, change the outcome of something that had not happened since 1962 and 186 out of 188 times now, and that was by political pressure. Then it's just fundamentally unfair. Like,
well,
where's another country's opportunity to remediate something? It's just, there's so many tentacles to it that it's just patently unfair. And I look, I wish the penalty, I wish it hadn't been called wrong to begin with, and we'd never be having this conversation. But I also do think the other thing is that it affected the dynamics of the game. Instead of it being a U.S., rallying together, we got, we're down a guy that we shouldn't be down. Let's get, rally together. They're fired up. Now they've kind of got this, like, should we really have this guy? And meanwhile, Belgium was quite clearly fired up. If you saw their post-game dances, sort of mocking the president, I think that told you that was part of their motivation too.
well, one of the things that also really bothered me with the World Cup, because I'm an official and I'm not anymore, thank goodness. For many coaches are happy about that. But what, when the official who was selected for the World Cup was not allowed into our country,
Oh,
and what he had worked his entire life for, to have that honor, and was
yeah.
turned away. And I'm not going to even blame our president. You know who I'm really? Where was FIBA? Where were they when that happened?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right, and I don't know what they did to protest it. I doubt they did enough. I probably shouldn't say more than that because I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but and a couple of those sorts of messages were really problematic. The things where certain countries citizens were going to have to pay $15,000 just to come into the country. They did drop some of those right before, but that affected, I think, travel. The way Iran was treated um, here, trying to get them right out after each match, just some stuff like that was really unfortunate. Um,
Well,
I
it
will say
wasn't
this though, just real quick, Ron, just
sure.
a prevailing message that came up time and time again during this is that um, people that came here, I think, were reminded that a country is about its people, not about its politics or its policies. And I spoke with one Algerian man in particular who said he was very scared about coming here and just decided to do it. And he was so grateful, and that anybody that is from Kansas City needs to come stay with him the next time they're in Algeria, and things of that nature. But that's just one anecdote. But I think there's a prevailing wave of that where people that came here were grateful to be reminded that many, if not most, Americans welcome them in our country and want them to feel safe and have a good time here.
Okay, and the last thing we're going to talk about before I sign off is you have done some writing about Allen Fieldhouse.
About what?
Allen Fieldhouse.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I've been there.
I know you've been there. Uh,
Oh,
Listen, it is a venerable place, but it never gets old, right? It's. I've been lucky. You've been all these places. I've been lucky to be most of them. Cameron and the Dean Dome and too many other places. The Hinkle, all these places, the Palestra. But Allen is a singular experience to me, and I don't know how many times I've been there by now. I guess certainly dozens. And it doesn't matter who they're playing. You just walk in there. It's just magic to go in there. I think this last year we saw a couple games, an Arizona game and a Connecticut game, where it might have been the loudest I'd ever seen it, except for maybe that final Missouri game in 2012 when that Missouri was moving on to the SEC. Just like an aircraft carrier taking off. I mean, or aircrafts on the carrier. I'm sorry, taking off. Just ear splitting. What was your
I
favorite game there?
oh gee whiz. I refereed in a lot of the places you mentioned, um, and they're don't get me wrong, they're big time venues and great crowds and so forth and so on. There's just nothing like Allen Fieldhouse. When I would walk into Allen Fieldhouse with my little bag, and as you walk in and you start walking to the locker room, and all the kids are already there, already trying to scramble for the seats. You know how they let them in and they go
Yeah,
flying around. And then when you walk out on the floor, the game hasn't started, Vahe. I mean, we're just going to go out there and watch these guys go through their silly little layup drills and all that, and the place is mad. It's like the middle of a game, and it's a tie game, and noise and screaming, and they've got some very, very vociferous fans. And one of the last games I refereed at Allen Fieldhouse, Bill Self was coaching, and I'm going down the sideline, and some guy, and I'd heard this guy for years. The guy said, "My God, why are you so old? Get out of here already. It's been around too long." But that's a great place. I just love going there. I refereed for uh, the guy right before Larry Brown.
yeah. Ted Owens.
That first year I was there, I refereed for Ted, just 1 year, and then Ted retired. Then Larry showed up, and then Roy,
Yep.
and then talk about comedians, uh, Mr. Bill Self, and all those guys could coach. You know what?
Now
My
you say,
opinion, my opinion, and you could correct me, or you don't even. But they were all terrific coaches, not good. Larry Brown, for some reason, could win anywhere he went. He was a
yeah,
hard guy to. He's a hard guy to understand.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
difficult. Difficult.
yeah. I've only spoken with Larry maybe one time, and that was by phone, and he was a great help. But I've never really quite understood the arc of his career that way. And Roy and Bill, I got to know pretty well. I'm interested that you call Bill a comedian because uh, Bill has a terrific personality, and really he can speak to almost anything in any way to anybody. But I don't know much about the in-game dynamics with referees. Like, if I mean, would there be laughter?
Once in a while, I had when I was supervising the MIAA, they had a doubleheader um, up in Kansas City. An MIAA team played Rockhurst in the first game, and then later KU played whoever. So my boss, Ralph McFillin, he called me. He says, "You have to go there." I said, Ron, it's part of the job. You have to be up there tonight for this event. So I got up there early, and he's on the other end of the floor with KU. They're practicing, for their game later that night. So I happen to walk down there, and he turns around and he looks at me. He says to me, he says, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "Well, here's the bad news. One of the referees got hurt, and they just called me. I'm on." He says, "You get your ass out of here right now." I started laughing, but he's just a funny, funny guy.
He
And
he really is. I've seldom seen anybody as comfortable in his own skin as Bill Self. Just from his sense of humor to I think believing he can address anything. He's quite unusual that way. I mean, and we've seen a lot of personalities in our time, Ron. But I mean,
oh, hell,
he's he's unique in that way. With a lot of competition, but I do think he stands out.
yes, I think the world of him. I have golly, I had a granddaughter who I think just graduated from KU, and my daughter and her husband are KU graduates. My daughter Emily, and and then I had another grandson who graduated from KU. I don't know why the hell they all went up to Kansas. I guess there's something about Missouri they didn't like, but they're big Kansas fans too. I mean, and I call Larry Hare once in a while. He's an assistant AD there, and I call him once in a while. I said, "Hey Larry, I got some of my grandsons. Can we get some tickets? Can you help me?" I said, I don't care what they cost. Help me." And he's awesome. But it's a great place, great school. I'm going to have to sign off, sir. But I'm going to. I want you to come back on this show. You're awesome.
Well,
You're
how
awesome.
could I refuse that? I'm happy to come on anytime, and I'm glad you're doing the show, and I am really honored you'd have me on. It's great to catch up with you.
Before I sign off, when you were here, did you do a lot of high school too?
I
Did
did,
you come?
especially the first 4 or 5 years, lot of high school all over. And that was before I understood that you're not supposed to say where'd you go to high school. Um, I would say it because I had just moved from the Philadelphia area, and to me it was like, well, if I ask where you went to high school, I'll probably know somebody there. It just was a point of conversation, like, Chip Allison or Rocky Streb, the wrestling coaches. Maybe you know them if you're at Oakville or one of the Hazelwoods or Parkways. I can't remember. I shouldn't have brought that up. But that was, and I think this is true in every profession. But I think it was really important to cover high schools before you covered other stuff. The stories also were always fresh, um, and I think it's the perfect way to get started in this business. And I think I would have been happy to cover high schools all the way through, to be honest.
Well, I think when I was in high school, and this is an old timer, and Sandy Pomerantz was my teammate, so we were covered all the time because he was a high school All American. Okay, and I always told Pomerantz the only reason you were a high school All American is I wasn't selfish and I gave you the ball. But anyway, John J. Archibald, is that name familiar?
Yeah, I knew
Ha-
John.
Harold Tuthill,
I did not know Harold.
yeah, Harold Tuthill. Those two guys covered us, and I mean every time we had a basketball game, one of them was there. And we were always getting, I think that's why we all had big heads when we were young kids. We were always in the newspaper because they were covering Pomerantz, but, we thought we were some kind of big deal. But anyway,
Yeah.
listen, my friend, thank you so much. Um, Good health. You look like $1,000,000. You and your wife do a lot of traveling, don't you?
We do a lot of traveling. I think if I look like $1,000,000, it's because I got the right light on it in this hotel room. But yeah, no, it's great to be with you, and yeah, we do. We try to kind of keep moving.
Well, keep moving and just continue to be the great man you are. Thank you so much.
You're very kind. Thanks for making my day, Ron. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll see you.
And now I'm going to sign off. It's been a great day. If you next Thursday, this session will be on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And if you like it, give us a like, and then please share it with a friend. And this, remember, I always leave you with this: today is the youngest you will ever be.